The horses' hooves echoed against the dusty ground as Arthur Zimmerman rode into what remained of St. Louis, Missouri, on a scorching afternoon in July 1873. His throat parched, and his spirit weary from 3 weeks on the trail hunting outlaws who had managed to slip through his fingers like smoke. He had been riding for the better part of the day without stopping, driven by some instinct he could not quite name, when he spotted the old Spanish mission church standing alone on the outskirts of town, its adobe walls crumbling and its wooden cross tilting precariously against the bright blue sky. Something about the place called to him, perhaps the promise of shade or simply the need for a moment of solitude before he returned to the chaos of civilization, and he guided his mare toward the abandoned structure with little thought beyond finding respite from the relentless sun. The church door hung askew on rusted hinges, and Arthur had to push hard to open it wide enough to slip inside. The interior was cool and dim, a welcome relief from the blazing heat outside, and he removed his hat as his eyes adjusted to the darkness. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light that pierced through gaps in the roof, and the smell of old wood and earth filled his nostrils. He took 3 steps forward before he heard it, a soft intake of breath that stopped him dead in his tracks, his hand instinctively moving to the revolver at his hip. In the far corner of the church, kneeling before what remained of an altar, was a woman. She turned slowly at the sound of his boots on the wooden floor, and even in the dim light, Arthur could see that she was beautiful in a way that made his chest tighten. Her dark auburn hair fell in waves past her shoulders, and her eyes, green as spring grass, regarded him with a mixture of wariness and resignation. She wore a simple blue traveling dress that was dusty and worn, and there was something about the set of her shoulders that spoke of exhaustion that went deeper than physical fatigue. "I did not mean to intrude," Arthur said, his voice rougher than he intended. He kept his hand away from his weapon, not wanting to frighten her further. "I thought this place was empty." The woman rose slowly to her feet, brushing dust from her skirts with deliberate movements. She studied him for a long moment, taking in his weathered face, the badge pinned to his vest, and the careful way he held himself. "It is empty," she said finally, her voice soft but steady. "Empty of everything except ghosts and memories." Arthur took another step closer, his curiosity overtaking his caution. "What are you doing out here alone? This is not safe country for a woman traveling without protection." A ghost of a smile touched her lips, but there was no humor in it. "I came here to find peace," she said simply, as if that explained everything. "Peace seems to be in short supply everywhere else." The words hung in the air between them, laden with a weight Arthur could feel but not quite understand. He looked at her more carefully now, noting the shadows under her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly before she clasped them together, the haunted quality in her gaze that he recognized, because he had seen it in his own reflection often enough. "My name is Arthur Zimmerman," he said, removing his hat completely and holding it in both hands. "I am a lawman, among other things, and you are—" She hesitated, as if even her name was something precious that she was reluctant to give away. "Victoria Zeller," she said at last. "And I am nothing in particular anymore, which is perhaps for the best." Arthur frowned at that, unsure how to respond to such a statement. He moved to one of the old wooden pews and gestured to it. "Would you mind if I sat for a moment? I have been riding since dawn, and my bones are not as young as they used to be." Victoria nodded, and he sat down carefully, the pew creaking under his weight. She remained standing, watching him with those remarkable green eyes, and he found himself wanting to know everything about her, which was unusual for a man who generally preferred to keep his distance from complications. "How long have you been here?" he asked. 3 days." she replied. Maybe 4. Time seems to move differently in this place. 3 days without food or water. Arthur's concern sharpened his tone. That is foolish, Miss Zeller. There is nothing out here for miles. I have water, she said, gesturing to a canvas bag in the corner. And I have not been particularly hungry. When you are running from things, appetite tends to diminish. There it was, the admission he had been waiting for without realizing it. What are you running from? Victoria moved to the pew across from him and sat down, her posture straight despite her obvious fatigue. Everything, she said quietly. My past, my mistakes, the expectations of others, the person I thought I would become, all of it. She looked at him directly then, and the raw honesty in her gaze made something shift in his chest. Have you ever felt that way, Mr. Zimmerman? As if the life you were living was not really yours, but rather a costume you put on each morning to satisfy everyone else? Arthur thought about the question, really thought about it, and found himself nodding slowly. More times than I care to admit, he said. I became a lawman because my father was one and his father before him. It was expected, but there are days when I wonder if I chose this path or if it chose me. And yet you wear the badge, Victoria observed. And yet I wear the badge, he agreed. Because even if the choice was not entirely mine, I have made it my own. I try to do right by it. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the whisper of wind through the broken walls. Arthur found himself reluctant to leave, which was strange because he had been eager for solitude only minutes before. There was something about Victoria Zeller that drew him in, something beyond her beauty, though that was undeniable. It was the sadness in her eyes mixed with a kind of fierce strength, the sense that she had been broken but not defeated. You cannot stay here, he said finally. I understand the need for peace, Miss Zeller, but this is not the way to find it. This church offers nothing but the illusion of sanctuary. Is that not what all sanctuaries offer? She asked. Illusions are sometimes all we have. No, Arthur said firmly. That is where you are wrong. Real peace, real sanctuary, those exist. They are just harder to find than an abandoned church in the middle of nowhere. Victoria's expression softened slightly, and for the first time he saw something other than wariness in her eyes. You sound very certain of that. I've lived long enough to know the difference between running away and moving forward, Arthur said. Right now, you are doing the former, but you strike me as a woman capable of the latter. She laughed then, a short, sharp sound that held more pain than mirth. You do not know me, Mr. Zimmerman. You have no idea what I am capable of or what I have done. Then tell me, he said simply. Tell me why you are here, alone and afraid, looking for peace in a place where none can be found. Victoria stood abruptly and walked to one of the broken windows, looking out at the vast expanse of prairie beyond. Arthur waited, sensing that she was wrestling with something internal, some decision about whether to trust him with her story. He remained silent, giving her the space to choose. I was engaged to be married, she said finally, her voice so quiet he had to strain to hear it. To a man in St. Louis, a banker named Edmund Haverford. He was respectable, wealthy, everything a woman of my station was supposed to want. My parents were thrilled. They saw the match as securing my future, elevating our family's standing in society. Arthur said nothing, just listened, and after a moment, Victoria continued. I tried to be the woman everyone expected me to be. I smiled at his tedious dinner parties. I nodded politely when he spoke about his business ventures. I allowed him to parade me around like a prized possession he had acquired. But there was something wrong, something I could not quite name at first. He was too controlling, too possessive. He wanted to know where I was every moment, who I spoke to, what I thought. It felt like being slowly suffocated. She turned to face Arthur, and he could see tears glistening in her eyes, though she held them back with visible effort. 3 months ago, I told him I could not marry him, that I needed more time, that something did not feel right. He did not take it well. He told me I was being hysterical, that women often got nervous before their wedding day, that I would come to my senses. When I insisted, when I removed his ring and tried to return it, he became angry. Truly angry in a way that frightened me. Arthur felt his jaw tighten, recognizing the pattern of a dangerous man. Did he hurt you? He grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises, Victoria said. And he told me that I belonged to him, that no one walks away from Edmund Haverford. He said if I tried to leave, he would ruin my family, that he had the power and influence to destroy everything my father had built, and I knew he was capable of it. Edmund is a man who always gets what he wants, no matter the cost to others. So you ran, Arthur said, understanding now. So I ran, she confirmed. Like a coward, in the middle of the night with only what I could carry. I left my family to face whatever consequences Edmund might bring, and I fled. I have been moving west ever since, staying in small towns for a few days at a time, always looking over my shoulder, always afraid he might have sent someone to find me. When I saw this church, I thought perhaps I could rest here, just for a little while. I thought perhaps God might offer some guidance, though I have not been much for prayer in recent years. Arthur stood and moved toward her, his movements slow and deliberate so as not to startle her. You are not a coward, Miss Zeller. You did what you had to do to survive. That takes courage, not cowardice. Does it? She asked, and the vulnerability in her voice made his heart ache, because it feels like the act of a frightened child, not a grown woman. Fear does not negate courage, Arthur said. Courage is being afraid and doing what you must anyway. You saw danger and you removed yourself from it. That is wisdom, not weakness. Victoria looked at him for a long moment, and something in her expression shifted. You are kind to say so, even if I am not certain I believe it. Believe it or not, it is the truth, Arthur said. He hesitated, then added, I have a proposal for you, Miss Zeller, if you will hear it. She raised an eyebrow. I am wary of proposals from men I have just met. A fair point, he acknowledged, but hear me out. I have a small ranch about 2 days' ride from here, just outside a town called Millbrook. It is not much, just a cabin and some land I have been trying to work when I am not off chasing outlaws. But it is isolated and safe, and no one would think to look for you there. You could stay for a while, rest properly, figure out your next move. I give you my word as a lawman and as a man that you would be under my protection and nothing more. Victoria stared at him as if he had spoken in a foreign language. Why would you do that? You do not know me. For all you know, everything I have told you could be a lie. It is not a lie, Arthur said with certainty. I have been reading people for 20 years, Miss Zeller, and I know truth when I hear it. As for why, well, maybe I am tired of chasing bad men and would like to help a good woman for a change. Maybe I see something in you that reminds me that there is still decency in this world worth protecting. Or maybe I am just a foolish man making an impulsive offer. Does the reason matter? It might, Victoria said, but there was a spark of something in her eyes now, something that had not been there before. Hope, perhaps, or at least the possibility of it. Then let me be honest, Arthur said. In my line of work I see a lot of ugliness. Violence, cruelty, the worst that humanity has to offer. It hardens a man, makes him cynical. But every now and then, I am reminded that there is still good in the world, still people worth fighting for. You walked away from comfort and security to preserve your own soul, Miss Zeller. That is admirable, and if I can help you find the peace you are looking for, even in some small way, then maybe it will remind me why I still wear this badge. Victoria was silent for so long that Arthur thought she might refuse. Then, slowly, she nodded. "I accept your offer, Mr. Zimmerman. Though I insist on earning my keep, I'm not looking for charity." Relief flooded through him, though he was not entirely sure why her acceptance mattered so much. "Fair enough. I could use help around the ranch. The place has been neglected while I have been away. When do we leave?" Victoria asked. "First thing tomorrow morning," Arthur replied. "For now, let us get you a proper meal and a real bed. There is a boarding house in town that is run by a woman named Mrs. Patterson. She is discreet and asks few questions. You can stay there tonight and I will collect you at dawn." Victoria gathered her few belongings, and together they left the old church. As Arthur helped her onto his horse, his hands careful and respectful, he found himself wondering what he had just committed himself to. Taking in a woman on the run from a powerful man was asking for trouble, the kind of trouble that could end careers or worse. But as Victoria settled into the saddle in front of him, her back straight and her head held high despite everything she had been through, Arthur knew he had made the right choice. He could not explain it, could not rationalize it with logic, but something deep in his gut told him that Victoria Zeller had just become the most important person in his life, though he had only known her for an hour. The ride into town was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Arthur was acutely aware of Victoria's presence, the way she held herself carefully to avoid pressing too closely against him, the faint scent of lavender that clung to her hair despite days of travel. When they reached the boarding house, he helped her down and introduced her to Mrs. Patterson, a sturdy woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "She needs a room for the night and some supper," Arthur explained. "I will be back for her in the morning." Mrs. Patterson looked between them with an assessing gaze that missed nothing, but she simply nodded. "Come along, dear. You look like you could use a hot bath and a good meal. Men never think of such things." Victoria glanced back at Arthur and he saw uncertainty in her eyes. "You will return?" she asked quietly. "I gave you my word," he said. "I will be here at first light." She nodded and followed Mrs. Patterson inside. Arthur stood on the street for a moment longer, watching the door close behind them, before turning to lead his horse to the livery stable. He had arrangements to make and supplies to gather if he was bringing Victoria to the ranch. More than that, he needed to think about what he was doing and why. He found himself at the saloon later that evening, nursing a whiskey and trying to make sense of the day's events. His friend, Deputy Marshal Thomas Reid, found him there and slid into the seat across from him. "Heard you were back in town," Thomas said, signaling the bartender for a drink. "Heard something else interesting, too. Word is you rode in with a woman, a pretty one from what I am told." Arthur should have known news would travel fast in a town like St. Louis. "I found her at the old mission church. She needed help." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "And you, being the noble sort, offered assistance. What is the story, Arthur? This is not like you." "What is that supposed to mean?" Arthur asked, his tone defensive. "It means you generally keep to yourself," Thomas said bluntly. "You are not the type to take in strays, especially female ones, so either this woman is in serious trouble or there is something else going on." Arthur took a drink, considering his response. Thomas was a good friend, one of the few he trusted completely. She is running from a bad situation, an engagement to a man who turned out to be controlling and potentially violent. She came west looking for a fresh start. "And you offered her what exactly?" Thomas asked carefully. "A place to stay at my ranch until she figures out her next move," Arthur said. "Nothing more than that." Thomas studied him for a long moment. "Be careful, my friend. I have known you for 10 years and I have never seen you take an interest in anyone. If you are not careful, this could become complicated." I am not taking an interest, Arthur protested, even as he knew it was a lie. I am simply helping someone in need. Keep telling yourself that, Thomas said with a knowing smile. Just remember, complicated can be good sometimes. You have been alone too long, Arthur. Maybe this woman is exactly what you need. Arthur did not respond to that, but Thomas's words stayed with him long after his friend left. He finished his drink and headed to the small room he kept above the general store, but sleep was elusive. His mind kept returning to Victoria, to the sadness in her eyes and the strength in her voice, to the way his heart had stuttered when she smiled, however briefly. He had meant what he said about helping her, but Thomas was right about one thing. This was already more complicated than a simple act of charity. The next morning, he arrived at the boarding house just as the sun was cresting the horizon. Victoria was waiting outside, her small bag in hand and her expression composed. She wore the same blue dress, but her hair was neatly braided and her face looked less drawn than it had the day before. "Good morning, Mr. Zimmerman," she said formally. "Good morning, Miss Zeller," he replied, matching her tone. "I hope you slept well." "Better than I have in weeks," she admitted. Mrs. Patterson was very kind. She asked no questions and made no judgments, which was a relief. Arthur helped her onto the horse he had borrowed for her, a gentle mare that would serve her well on the journey. "We have about 2 days of travel ahead of us," he explained as he mounted his own horse. "We will stop at various points along the way to rest and water the horses. If you need to stop at any time, just let me know." Victoria nodded, and they set off. The first hours passed in relative silence, both of them settling into the rhythm of travel. The landscape gradually shifted from the busier areas around St. Louis to more open prairie, the grass swaying in the constant wind. Arthur found himself glancing at Victoria frequently, checking to make sure she was managing the ride comfortably. Each time, he found her sitting straight in the saddle, her eyes on the horizon, lost in thought. Around midday, they stopped by a small creek to rest the horses and eat the provisions Arthur had packed. Victoria sat on a fallen log and accepted the bread and cheese he offered with quiet thanks. "You are a skilled rider," Arthur observed. "Not all women from the city are comfortable on horseback. My father kept horses when I was growing up," Victoria explained. "Before he became consumed with business and social climbing, he used to take me riding every Sunday. Those were some of my happiest memories." A shadow crossed her face. "I wonder if he thinks of those times now, or if his disappointment in me has erased all the good years." "I am sure he loves you," Arthur said. "Parents do not stop loving their children because of one decision." "You do not know my father," Victoria said quietly. "He values reputation above all else. I have damaged that reputation badly. I am not sure he will forgive me." Arthur wanted to argue, to tell her that any father would be proud of a daughter with her courage and integrity, but he sensed that empty reassurances would not help. Instead, he changed the subject. "Tell me something about yourself that has nothing to do with Edmund Haverford or your family, something that is just yours." Victoria looked surprised by the question, then thoughtful. "I used to paint," she said after a moment. "Watercolors mostly. Landscapes and flowers. It was not considered a serious pursuit, just something young ladies did to fill their time, but I loved it. There was something about capturing the way light fell on water or the exact shade of a rose petal that made me feel at peace. I had to leave my paints behind when I ran. I suppose that is one more thing I have lost." "You can paint again," Arthur said firmly. "Peace does not have to be lost just because circumstances change. You can find it again, build it again." "You make it sound so simple," Victoria said. "I did not say it was simple," Arthur corrected. "I said it was possible. There is a difference." They continued their journey, and as the afternoon wore on, Victoria began to open up more. She told him about her childhood, about a younger brother who had died of fever when she was 12, about her mother's obsession with social standing and her father's long hours at work. She spoke of her dreams of seeing the ocean someday, of traveling to places she had only read about in books. Arthur found himself sharing his own stories in return, about growing up with the weight of family expectation, about the first time he had to arrest a man he had known since childhood, about the loneliness that came with a life spent enforcing the law. By the time they made camp that evening, something had shifted between them. The initial wariness had given way to a tentative trust, the formal distance replaced by something that felt almost like friendship. Arthur built a fire while Victoria laid out their bedrolls, and they ate a simple meal of beans and coffee as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. "Thank you," Victoria said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence that had fallen between them. Arthur looked at her, confused. "For what?" "For treating me like a person," she said. "Not a problem to be solved or a possession to be managed, just a person. I had forgotten what that felt like." The sincerity in her voice made Arthur's chest tighten. "You deserve to be treated that way," he said. "Everyone does." Victoria held his gaze for a long moment, and in the firelight, her eyes seemed to glow. "I am beginning to think you might be one of the good ones, Mr. Zimmerman." "Just Arthur," he said. "And I am nothing special, Miss Zeller, just a man trying to do right when he can." "Victoria," she said with a small smile, "and I think you are wrong about not being special, but I will not argue the point tonight. I am too tired." They settled in for the night, Arthur taking the first watch while Victoria slept. He sat by the fire, his rifle across his knees, and found himself thinking about the future for the first time in years. For so long, he had simply moved from one day to the next, doing his job and expecting nothing more from life. But now, with Victoria's presence disrupting his carefully maintained routine, he was aware of possibilities he had never considered. It was frightening and exhilarating in equal measure. The second day of travel was easier, both of them more relaxed with each other. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing observations about the landscape, and debating the merits of various authors they had both read. Arthur discovered that Victoria had a sharp wit and a quick laugh when she allowed herself to relax, and he found himself working to draw out that laughter, treasuring each sound like a precious gift. They reached the ranch as the sun was beginning to set on the second day. It was a modest place, as Arthur had described, a sturdy log cabin with a small barn and a corral for the horses. The land stretched out in gentle rolling hills covered in grass, with a stream running through the property and mountains visible in the distance. "It is beautiful," Victoria said, and Arthur could hear the genuine appreciation in her voice. "It needs work," Arthur admitted. "I have not been here much in the past few months, but it is solid and safe and the land is good." He helped her down from her horse and led her into the cabin. The interior was simple but clean, with a main room that served as kitchen and living area, a small bedroom off to one side, and a loft accessible by a ladder. Arthur had built most of the furniture himself, rough but functional pieces that suited the space. "You will take the bedroom," Arthur said, already anticipating her protest. "I will sleep in the loft. It is more than adequate for one person." Victoria looked like she wanted to argue but seemed too tired to fight. "Just for a few nights," she said, "until I can figure out something else." "Stay as long as you need," Arthur said. "I meant what I offered, Victoria. You are safe here." Over the following days, they fell into an easy routine. Arthur tended to the necessary repairs around the ranch, fixing fence posts and patching holes in the barn roof. While Victoria cleaned the cabin and tended a small vegetable garden, she found behind the house. She proved to be capable and hardworking, never complaining about the physical labor or the isolation. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and talk as the sun set, sharing stories and dreams and slowly building something that felt dangerously close to intimacy. Arthur was acutely aware of his growing feelings for Victoria, the way his heart lifted when he heard her singing softly while she worked, the way he found excuses to be near her, the way he lay awake at night in the loft, thinking about the woman sleeping below. He tried to remind himself that she was vulnerable, that she had just escaped one bad situation and did not need him complicating her life further. But the heart, he was learning, did not always listen to logic. One evening, about a week after they had arrived at the ranch, Victoria found him in the barn grooming his horse. She carried a basket covered with a cloth, and there was a lightness to her step that he had not seen before. "I made pie," she announced, pulling back the cloth to reveal a golden-crusted creation that smelled of apples and cinnamon. "Mrs. Patterson gave me her recipe, and I found apples growing wild by the creek. I wanted to thank you properly for your kindness." Arthur stared at the pie, touched by the gesture in a way that seemed disproportionate to its simplicity. "You did not have to do that." "I wanted to," Victoria said. "You have given me so much, Arthur. A safe place, time to heal friendship. Let me give you something in return, even if it is just pie." They sat on the porch steps and ate the pie directly from the pan, passing a single fork between them and laughing at the informality of it. The pie was delicious, sweet and tart in perfect balance, and Arthur told her so. "My mother would be appalled at my manners," Victoria said, licking a bit of filling from her thumb. "Ladies do not eat from pans with cowboys on porch steps." "Good thing you are not in your mother's parlor then," Arthur said. "Out here you can make your own rules." Victoria's expression grew serious. "Do you really believe that? That we can escape the expectations placed on us and create our own lives?" "I believe we can try," Arthur said. "I believe that is what you are doing right now. You chose to leave rather than conform to someone else's vision of who you should be. That takes real courage, Victoria. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise." She looked at him with those remarkable green eyes, and he saw vulnerability there mixed with something warmer, something that made his breath catch. "What about you, Arthur? What rules would you break if you could?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility. Arthur knew what he wanted to say, what he wanted to admit, but fear held him back. Fear that he was misreading the moment, fear that she was not ready, fear that he would ruin the fragile peace they had built. "I would stop living my life for duty and start living it for joy," he said finally. "I would stop being afraid of wanting things for myself." "What do you want?" Victoria asked softly, and the way she looked at him made his heart race. Arthur set down the pie pan and turned to face her fully. "I want to be honest with you about something," he said, his voice steady despite the nervousness churning in his gut. "These past weeks with you have been some of the best I have known. You make me laugh. You challenge me to think differently. You remind me that there is beauty in the world beyond the ugliness I usually see. I find myself looking forward to each morning because it means another day with you. And I know this is probably the worst possible timing, that you just escaped one man's control and do not need another man's feelings complicating your life. But I also know that honesty matters, so I am telling you that I care about you, Victoria, more than I probably should." Victoria's expression was unreadable for a long moment, and Arthur braced himself for rejection. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face, genuine and bright in a way that transformed her completely. "You impossible man," she said, and there was affection in her voice. "Do you really think your feelings are a burden?" "Arthur," You have shown me what it means to be respected, to be valued as a person rather than a possession. You have given me space to heal and time to remember who I am beyond the expectations others placed on me. If anything, your feelings are a gift, not a complication. Arthur felt hope flare in his chest. Does that mean you feel something too? I feel many things, Victoria said, reaching out to take his hand. Her touch sent warmth spreading through him. I feel safe with you in a way I never felt with Edmund. I feel seen and heard. I feel like I can breathe fully for the first time in years. And yes, I feel something that I think might be love, though I am almost afraid to name it because the last time I thought I was in love, I was so terribly wrong. This is different, Arthur said, squeezing her hand gently. We are different. There is no pressure here, no expectations. Whatever happens between us happens because we both want it, not because of duty or social standing or anything else. Just two people choosing each other. Victoria moved closer to him on the steps, and Arthur wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her against his side. She fit perfectly there, her head resting on his shoulder, and they sat in silence as the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared. I am still afraid sometimes, Victoria admitted quietly. Afraid that Edmund will find me, that he will make good on his threats. Afraid that I have ruined my family's life. Afraid that I do not know how to be happy because I have been pretending for so long. Fear is normal, Arthur said, but you do not have to face it alone anymore. Whatever comes, we will handle it together. And as for learning to be happy, well, I think you are already on that path. I have seen your smile, Victoria. The real one, not the polite mask you showed the world. That smile is worth protecting. She tilted her head to look up at him. You make me want to believe in possibilities again. Then believe, Arthur said. He cupped her face gently with his free hand, his thumb brushing across her cheek. Believe that you deserve happiness. Believe that you deserve love. Believe that your life can be whatever you choose to make it. Victoria's eyes shimmered with tears, but they were good tears, the kind that came with release and hope. I do believe, she whispered. When I am with you, I believe. Arthur leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, but she did not. Instead, she lifted her face to his, and their lips met in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise. It was nothing like the demanding kisses Edmund had forced on her, nothing like the mechanical affection she had learned to endure. This was different, a meeting of equals, a sharing rather than a taking. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. Well, Victoria said, a laugh bubbling up. That was unexpected. Good unexpected or bad unexpected? Arthur asked, though he thought he knew the answer. Very good unexpected, Victoria confirmed. She kissed him again, more confidently this time, and Arthur felt something in his chest unlock, some part of himself he had kept guarded for so long finally opening up. They stayed on the porch until the night grew cool, talking and kissing and planning a future that was still uncertain, but felt possible in a way it never had before. When they finally went inside, Arthur climbed to his loft while Victoria retired to the bedroom, but both of them felt the shift that had occurred. They were no longer just two people sharing space out of necessity. They were partners, companions, and potentially something much more. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest Arthur could remember. He taught Victoria to shoot, patiently showing her how to hold the rifle steady and breathe through the recoil. She proved to be a quick study, her hands steady and her eyes sharp. In turn, she taught him to appreciate small beauties he had overlooked in his focus on duty and survival. She pointed out wildflowers growing by the creek, the patterns of birds in flight, the way the light changed throughout the day. They worked together to improve the ranch, Victoria helping him repair fences and tend the small herd of cattle he kept. Arthur helping her expand the vegetable garden and build a chicken coop. The physical labor was hard but satisfying, and they fell into bed each night pleasantly exhausted and content. Arthur began sleeping in the main room on the floor so that Victoria could have proper privacy, though they spent most evenings curled together on the porch or by the fire, reluctant to part even for sleep. One afternoon, about a month after Victoria had arrived, Arthur rode into Millbrook to pick up supplies and check in with the local sheriff, an old friend named William Carson. Millbrook was a small town, barely more than a main street with a handful of buildings, but it served the scattered ranches in the area well enough. "Arthur," William greeted him, emerging from the sheriff's office with a broad smile. "Good to see you. It has been a while since you came through." "I have been busy with the ranch," Arthur explained, shaking his friend's hand. "How have things been here?" "Quiet, mostly," William said, "though there was a stranger in town last week asking questions. Well-dressed fellow from back east, said he was looking for a young woman who might have passed through. Had a description that could have fit half the women in Missouri, but he seemed very determined." Arthur felt his stomach drop. "Did he give a name?" "Said his name was Haverford." "Edmund Haverford. Does that mean something to you?" Everything in Arthur went cold and alert. "It might. Did he say anything else?" Where he was headed, William's expression grew serious, reading the tension in his friend. "He said he was checking all the towns along the western routes. Apparently this woman he is looking for is his fiancé, and he is concerned for her safety. The way he talked, you would think he was some kind of hero trying to rescue a damsel in distress." William paused, studying Arthur's face. "But you do not believe that story, do you?" "No," Arthur said flatly. "I do not. If Haverford comes back this way, will you send word to me immediately?" "Of course," William agreed. "Arthur, what is going on?" Arthur considered how much to reveal, then decided his friend deserved the truth. "I have someone staying at my ranch. A woman who left Haverford because he was controlling and potentially dangerous. She came west to escape him, and I offered her protection. If he is looking for her, that means he has not given up." William's face hardened. "You know I will help however I can. Is she safe out at your place?" "For now," Arthur said. "But I need to get back and warn her. If Haverford is checking towns, it is only a matter of time before someone points him in our direction." He gathered his supplies quickly and rode hard back to the ranch, his mind racing with possibilities and plans. He had promised Victoria that she was safe, that he would protect her, and he intended to keep that promise. But Edmund Haverford was clearly more determined than they had anticipated, and determination combined with money and influence could be a dangerous thing. Victoria was hanging laundry when he arrived, her face lifting with a smile that faltered when she saw his expression. "What is wrong?" Arthur dismounted and went to her immediately, taking her hands in his. "Edmund has been to Millbrook. He is looking for you, asking questions in towns along the western routes. My friend the sheriff there told him nothing, but we need to be prepared for the possibility that he might track you here." The color drained from Victoria's face. "I knew this peace was too good to last," she said, her voice hollow. "I should have kept moving. I should never have stayed in one place." "No," Arthur said firmly, gripping her hands tighter. "You did the right thing. Running endlessly is no way to live. We will face this together, Victoria. I will not let him take you." "You do not understand what kind of man he is," Victoria said, fear sharpening her tone. "He has money and connections. He can make things very difficult for you, Arthur. You could lose your position, your reputation. I cannot let you sacrifice that for me." Arthur pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "Listen to me carefully. I do not care about my position or my reputation if it means leaving you unprotected. You are not alone in this anymore. We will figure out a way to handle Edmund Haverford that does not involve you spending the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. Victoria clung to him, and he could feel her trembling. How? How do we stop a man like that? I do not know yet, Arthur admitted, but I will figure it out. In the meantime, I am going to teach you to defend yourself properly, and we are going to be vigilant. If anyone comes to the ranch who you do not know, you get to the cellar and you stay there until I tell you it is safe. Understood? Victoria nodded against his chest. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other while the laundry flapped in the wind and the afternoon sun beat down on them. Finally, Victoria pulled back and looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. I cannot lose this, she said quietly. I cannot lose you, Arthur. This life we have been building, this happiness, it is the first real thing I have ever had. The thought of Edmund taking it away makes me feel sick. He will not take it away, Arthur promised. I swear to you, Victoria, whatever I have to do, I will keep you safe and I will keep us together. That evening, after they had eaten a mostly silent dinner, Arthur laid out his plan. I am going to ride to St. Louis tomorrow. I want to find out exactly what Edmund has been telling people, what story he is using to justify his search. If he has been portraying himself as a concerned fiancé, we need evidence to counter that narrative. Do you have anything from your time with him? Letters, anything that might show his true character? Victoria thought for a moment, then went to her room and returned with a small bundle wrapped in cloth. I kept some of his letters, she said. The ones from after I tried to break the engagement. I do not know why I held on to them. Maybe as proof, or maybe because I needed to remind myself that I made the right choice in leaving. Arthur unwrapped the bundle and began reading. The letters started out pleading and supposedly loving, but as they progressed, the tone changed dramatically. Edmund wrote of how Victoria belonged to him, how she was being foolish and ungrateful, how he would find her no matter where she went and make her see reason. The final letter was openly threatening, stating that if Victoria did not return willingly, he would have no choice but to use whatever means necessary to retrieve what was his. These are perfect, Arthur said grimly. They show exactly what kind of man he is: possessive, controlling, threatening. Combined with your testimony about his physical violence, this should be enough to get the law on our side. Edmund has friends in the law, Victoria warned. He has made sure of that over the years. I do not know if evidence will matter if he has already convinced people that I am an unstable woman who needs to be brought home for her own good. Arthur considered that, knowing she was right to be concerned. Men like Edmund often built networks of influence specifically to protect themselves from consequences. But Arthur had connections of his own, and more importantly, he had a reputation for integrity that might carry weight. Then we will need to be strategic, he said. I know a federal marshal in St. Louis, a man named Charles Montgomery. He is honest and does not take bribes or bow to political pressure. If I can present this case to him directly, he might be able to help us. At the very least, he can document your claims officially, which will make it harder for Edmund to simply abduct you without consequences. Victoria looked hopeful for the first time since Arthur had delivered the news. You really think that could work? I think it is our best option, Arthur said. I want you to write out everything that happened with Edmund. Every controlling behavior, every threat, the physical assault. Date everything as best you can remember. We will build a case that shows a pattern of abuse and intimidation. They spent the next several hours doing exactly that. Victoria wrote while Arthur organized the letters chronologically, building a timeline of Edmund's escalating behavior. It was painful for Victoria to relive those months, and more than once she had to stop and collect herself, but she persevered. By the time they finished, they had a substantial dossier that painted a clear picture of an abusive relationship. "I am proud of you," Arthur said when they were done. "I know that was not easy." "Nothing worthwhile ever is," Victoria replied, echoing his own words from weeks before. She managed a tired smile. "When will you leave for St. Louis?" "At first light," Arthur said. "I do not like leaving you alone, but the sooner we handle this, the safer you will be." "I will be fine," Victoria assured him, though he could see the worry in her eyes. "I know how to shoot now, and I will stay alert. You have taught me well." Arthur moved to where she sat at the table and knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "I need you to promise me something. If anything feels wrong while I am gone, if you have even the slightest suspicion that someone is watching the ranch or approaching, you take one of the horses and ride to Millbrook. Go straight to Sheriff Carson and tell him what is happening. Do not try to be brave, do not wait to see if you are right. Just go. Can you promise me that?" Victoria looked into his eyes and nodded solemnly. "I promise. I will not take unnecessary risks." "Good." Arthur leaned forward and kissed her gently. "I will be back as soon as I can. 3 days, maybe 4 at most. And when I return, we will have the law on our side and you will not have to be afraid anymore." That night, Arthur did not sleep in the main room. Instead, at Victoria's quiet request, he held her in his arms in the bedroom, both of them fully clothed but needing the comfort of closeness. They did not make love, though the desire was there. This was not the time for passion but for reassurance, for the simple human need to not face fear alone. "I love you," Victoria whispered into the darkness. "I know it is soon, and we have only known each other a short time, but I love you, Arthur. You have shown me what love really is, and I need you to know that before you leave." Arthur felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I love you too," he said. "I think I have loved you since that first day in the church when you told me you came there to find peace. You are the bravest, strongest woman I have ever met, Victoria. Whatever happens, remember that." They held each other through the night, and when Arthur rose before dawn to prepare for his journey, Victoria got up with him. She packed food for his trip and checked his supplies, her movements efficient despite her obvious reluctance to see him go. "Come back to me," she said as he mounted his horse in the gray pre-dawn light. "Always," Arthur promised. 3 days, Victoria, 4 at most. I love you." "I love you too," she replied, and then he was riding away, his heart heavy but his resolve firm. The ride to St. Louis took Arthur a day and a half of hard travel. He arrived in the city on a hot afternoon and went directly to the federal courthouse, asking for Marshal Montgomery. He was made to wait for nearly an hour before being shown into a sparse office where a stern-looking man in his 50s sat behind a desk covered in paperwork. "Zimmerman," Charles Montgomery said, rising to shake Arthur's hand. "It has been a while. What brings you to St. Louis?" Arthur laid out the situation, holding nothing back. He presented the letters, Victoria's written testimony, and his own observations of her condition when he found her. Charles listened without interrupting, his expression growing increasingly grim as the story unfolded. "This is a serious matter," Charles said when Arthur finished. "If what you are telling me is true, and I have no reason to doubt you, then Edmund Haverford has been misrepresenting the situation to anyone who will listen. I have heard his name around town. He is well connected and not well liked, though he hides that behind a veneer of respectability." "Can you help us?" Arthur asked directly. Charles steepled his fingers, thinking. "I can document her claims officially. That will give you some legal standing if Haverford tries to force her to return. But I need to be honest with you, Arthur. Unless she is willing to press charges for the assault, which would mean coming back here and facing him in court. There is a limit to what the law can do. A man searching for his supposed fiancé is not technically committing a crime. What if she broke the engagement? Arthur pressed. Does she not have the right to refuse to marry him? Morally, absolutely, Charles said. Legally, it is more complicated. If he gave her gifts, jewelry, things of value, he could potentially sue for their return or for breach of promise. It is an old law and rarely enforced, but it exists, and men like Haverford know how to use every advantage. Arthur felt frustration building. So what are you telling me? That she has to either live in fear or face him in court where he has all the advantages. I am telling you that the legal system is not always set up to protect the people who need it most, Charles said bluntly. But I am also telling you that I will do everything in my power to help. Give me the letters and her testimony. I will file an official report documenting her claims of abuse. That way, if anything happens to her, if Haverford tries anything, there is a paper trail. It is not perfect, but it is something. Arthur reluctantly handed over the precious documents, trusting his old friend to use them well. What else can we do? Charles thought for a moment. There is another option, though it is unconventional. If Miss Zeller were to marry someone else, her legal connection to Haverford would be permanently severed. As her husband, another man would have the legal right to protect her interests and refuse Haverford access to her. The suggestion hung in the air. Arthur had thought about marriage, of course he had, but in the context of a future they were building together, not as a legal maneuver. Still, the logic was sound. That would require her consent, Arthur said carefully. I will not pressure her into marriage as a form of protection. That would make me no better than Haverford. Of course, Charles agreed. I am simply presenting it as an option. For what it is worth, Arthur, it is clear that you care deeply for this woman. If you were to marry for love as well as protection, that would be a different situation entirely. Arthur left the courthouse with much to think about. He spent the rest of the day making discreet inquiries about Edmund Haverford, talking to shopkeepers and bartenders and anyone else who might have information. What he learned was not encouraging. Haverford was indeed searching for Victoria, and he was telling everyone who would listen that his fiancée had suffered some kind of breakdown and disappeared. He painted himself as a devoted man desperate to find the woman he loved and bring her home safely. But Arthur also found a few people willing to speak more honestly. A clerk at a hotel told him about Haverford's temper, how he had berated a maid to tears over a trivial error. A merchant described how Haverford had tried to force him to extend credit beyond reasonable limits, threatening to ruin his business if he refused. A pattern emerged of a man who used his wealth and position to bully others into compliance. Armed with this additional information, Arthur returned to Charles the next day. I need you to document these accounts as well, he said, introducing the witnesses he had brought. I want a complete picture of who Edmund Haverford really is, not the image he presents to society. Charles interviewed each witness carefully, taking detailed notes. By the time they were finished, the case against Haverford's character was substantial. This is good work, Arthur, Charles said. I will make sure this is all properly filed. If Haverford causes any trouble, you have significant ammunition to fight back. Thank you, Charles, Arthur said with genuine gratitude. You are giving Victoria a chance at real freedom, not just the illusion of it. Arthur left St. Louis early the next morning, eager to return to Victoria. He had been gone 3 days, and though that was within the time frame he had promised, he felt the urgency to be back at her side. The return journey seemed to take forever, each mile dragging despite his fast pace. He arrived at the ranch late in the afternoon of the 4th day, the sun already sinking toward the horizon. The place looked quiet and peaceful, smoke rising from the chimney suggesting Victoria was cooking dinner. Arthur felt relief wash over him as he dismounted, calling out to let her know he was back. But something was wrong. The chickens were out of their coop, scratching freely in the yard instead of being properly secured for the evening. The barn door hung open, though Arthur distinctly remembered closing it before he left. And Victoria, who should have come running at the sound of his voice, was nowhere to be seen. Arthur drew his revolver and approached the cabin carefully, every sense on high alert. The front door was slightly ajar, and when he pushed it open, his worst fears were confirmed. The interior was in disarray, furniture overturned and dishes broken on the floor. Clear signs of a struggle. "Victoria!" he shouted, searching frantically through the small space. The bedroom was empty. The cellar was empty. There was no sign of her anywhere. He ran to the barn, hoping against hope that she was hiding there, but found nothing except clear evidence that someone had recently taken horses. Arthur's mind raced, piecing together what must have happened. Someone had come while he was gone, someone who had taken Victoria despite her promise to flee to Millbrook if danger threatened, which meant she had either not had warning or had not been able to escape. The thought of her in Edmund Haverford's hands made his blood run cold. He forced himself to think logically, to use the skills he had honed over years of tracking outlaws. Outside, in the soft dirt near the barn, he found hoofprints. 3 horses at least, maybe 4. They had headed east, back toward the main road that led to St. Louis. Arthur noted the pattern of one set of prints, the way the left rear shoe had a distinctive chip. That would help him track them. He quickly gathered supplies, his movements efficient despite the panic clawing at his chest. Fresh ammunition, food, water, a bedroll. He checked his rifle and his revolvers, making sure everything was in perfect working order. Then he mounted his fastest horse and set out after the tracks, following them as the last light faded from the sky. Arthur rode through the night, stopping only briefly to rest his horse and verify the trail. The hoofprints were clear enough in the soft ground, and whoever had taken Victoria was not trying particularly hard to hide their tracks. They were confident, which suggested they had numbers and did not expect pursuit. That might work to Arthur's advantage. By dawn, he had closed some of the distance. The tracks were fresher now, perhaps only a few hours old. He pushed on, ignoring his own exhaustion and the protests of his tired muscles. Victoria needed him, and nothing else mattered. Around midday, he spotted them. 4 riders moving at a leisurely pace along the road, one of them clearly a woman whose hands were bound. Arthur felt rage surge through him at the sight, but he forced it down. Anger would not help Victoria. Clear thinking and decisive action would. He circled ahead, using his knowledge of the terrain to position himself along the route they were taking. Then he waited, his rifle ready, his heart hammering in his chest. As the riders approached, he stepped out into the road, his weapon trained on the lead man. "Stop right there," Arthur commanded, his voice hard as iron. "Release the woman and ride away, and nobody has to get hurt." The riders pulled up, and Arthur got his first good look at them. 3 were clearly hired guns, men with the hard eyes and quick hands of professional fighters. The 4th was Edmund Haverford, and Arthur knew him instantly from Victoria's descriptions. He was handsome in a polished way, with dark hair and expensive clothes, but there was something cold in his eyes that spoke to the cruelty Victoria had described. "You must be the lawman," Edmund said, his tone conversational despite the rifle pointed at his chest. "Victoria mentioned you in her little hideaway." "Arthur, was it? I must say, you have caused me considerable trouble." Arthur's eyes found Victoria, tied to her saddle but unharmed from what he could see. Their gazes locked, and he saw fear in her eyes mixed with relief at his presence. "Victoria is not going anywhere with you, Haverford. Release her now." Edmund laughed, a cold sound without humor. "I am afraid I cannot do that. Victoria is my fiancé and she has been unwell. I am simply taking her home where she can receive proper care. I have every right to do so." "You have no rights over her," Arthur said, his fingers steady on the trigger. "She ended your engagement months ago. You have no claim to her." "I have every claim," Edmund countered. "She accepted my proposal and my ring. In the eyes of society and the law, she belongs to me until I say otherwise." "Women are not property," Arthur said, his voice dangerously quiet. "And Victoria has made her choice clear. She does not want to be with you. Kidnapping her against her will is a crime, Haverford. Release her and face the consequences like a man." Edmund's expression hardened. "You are outnumbered, lawman, 4 against 1. Those are poor odds." "Maybe," Arthur acknowledged, "but I am the one with the rifle aimed at your heart. Are you willing to bet your life that I miss?" Tension crackled in the air. The hired guns shifted in their saddles, hands hovering near their weapons. Edmund stared at Arthur, clearly weighing his options. Then he smiled, and it was the smile of a man who believed he always won. "I am willing to bet that you are too noble to shoot an unarmed man in cold blood," Edmund said. "It goes against everything men like you stand for. So I am going to ride away with Victoria, and you are going to let me because the alternative is gunfighting in which innocent people might get hurt." Including Victoria herself. Arthur felt the calculation play out in his mind. Edmund was right that he would not shoot an unarmed man, but Edmund was also making a critical mistake. He assumed Arthur was acting alone. "You are right about one thing," Arthur said. "I will not shoot you in cold blood, but I do not have to." He raised his voice slightly. "Now, William." From behind a boulder to the side of the road, Sheriff William Carson stepped out with his own rifle raised, and from the other side, Deputy Thomas Reed appeared, his revolvers drawn. The hired guns found themselves suddenly facing 3 lawmen instead of 1, and their confidence evaporated. "Evening, gentlemen," William said pleasantly. "I suggest you all keep your hands where we can see them. Any sudden moves and my friends here get nervous." "And you really do not want to see what happens when we get nervous." Edmund's face flushed with anger as he realized he had been outmaneuvered. "This is an outrage. I have done nothing wrong." "You kidnapped a woman against her will," Thomas said. "That is very wrong, regardless of what you told yourself to justify it. Now, one of you is going to ride over here nice and slow and untie Miss Zeller. The rest of you are going to sit very still and think about your life choices." One of the hired guns, clearly deciding that whatever Edmund was paying him was not worth dying for, carefully dismounted and approached Victoria. He untied her bonds without meeting her eyes, then stepped back with his hands raised. Victoria urged her horse forward immediately, guiding it toward Arthur. The moment she was close enough, he reached out and pulled her from the saddle, gathering her into his arms while still keeping his rifle trained on the group. "Are you hurt?" Arthur asked urgently, his eyes scanning her for injuries. "No," Victoria said, her voice shaking but strong. "I am fine. They came while you were gone. I tried to reach the cellar, but there were too many of them. Oh, Arthur, I was so afraid." "You are safe now," Arthur promised. "I have got you." Edmund was staring at Victoria with an expression of disbelief. "You would choose this life, this crude cowboy, over everything I could give you? Wealth, status, respect." Victoria straightened in Arthur's arms, facing her former fiancé directly. "He has given me something worth far more than wealth or status, Edmund. He has given me freedom, respect, and love. Real love, not the possessive obsession you called love. I do not belong to you, and I never will." You will regret this, Edmund said, his voice venomous. I will make sure you regret it. No, you will not, Arthur said flatly. Because you are going to get on your horse and ride back to St. Louis, and you are going to leave Victoria alone. If you come near her again, if you threaten her in any way, I have documented evidence with the federal marshal of your abusive behavior and your threats. I also have witnesses to your true character ready to testify. You try anything, and I will destroy the respectable image you have worked so hard to build. Do you understand me? Edmund's jaw worked, fury evident in every line of his body. But he was beaten and he knew it. The hired guns were already backing away, clearly done with the entire situation. Finally, Edmund spoke through gritted teeth. This is not over. Yes, it is, Arthur said. It is over, Haverford. Let it go and move on with your life. For a long moment, it seemed like Edmund might try something foolish. Then, with a savage jerk on his reins, he turned his horse and rode away, his hired men following quickly. The three lawmen kept their weapons ready until the group had disappeared from sight. Only then did Arthur lower his rifle and turn his full attention to Victoria. She was trembling now that the immediate danger had passed, and he wrapped his arms around her fully, letting her bury her face against his chest. "It is all right," he murmured into her hair. "You are safe. I have got you." William and Thomas approached, their expressions sympathetic. "We will keep an eye out," William said. "Make sure Haverford actually leaves the territory, but I think he got the message. Men like that are bullies, and bullies back down when they realize their target will not be intimidated." "Thank you both," Arthur said sincerely. "I owe you." "You owe us nothing," Thomas replied. "That is what friends are for. Now, get your lady home and take care of her. We will handle things from here." Arthur helped Victoria onto his horse and climbed up behind her, keeping her secure in his arms. They rode back toward the ranch slowly, neither of them speaking, both processing what had happened. Victoria leaned back against his chest, and Arthur could feel the tension gradually leaving her body as the miles passed. When they finally reached the ranch, Arthur helped her down and they walked into the cabin together. Victoria surveyed the damage from the struggle, her expression sad but not defeated. "We can clean this up," she said quietly. "Later," Arthur said. "Right now you need to rest." He guided her to the bedroom, helped her remove her boots and covered her with a blanket. She caught his hand as he started to leave. "Stay with me," she said. "Please." Arthur lay down beside her, still fully dressed, and she curled against him. They lay like that for a long time, not sleeping but simply being together, finding comfort in each other's presence. Finally, Victoria spoke. "I thought I had lost this," she said. When they tied me up and started taking me away, all I could think was that I had found something real and good and it was being stolen from me. I fought them, Arthur. I tried so hard to get away." "I know," Arthur said, stroking her hair. "You are so brave, Victoria." "So incredibly brave." "I did not feel brave," she admitted. "I felt terrified. But then I remembered what you told me, that fear does not negate courage. So I held on to that, held on to thoughts of you, held on to the belief that somehow you would find me." "I will always find you," Arthur promised. "No matter what, no matter where, I will always come for you." Victoria tilted her head to look at him. "When Edmund was taking me away, all I could think was that I wanted to be your wife. Not for legal protection, not as a strategy, but because I love you and I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep in your arms every night. I want to work beside you on this ranch and raise children here and grow old together. Is that what you want too?" Arthur felt his heart swell with emotion so strong it almost hurt. "That is exactly what I want," he said. "I went to St. Louis and talked to the federal marshal. He suggested marriage as a way to legally protect you from Edmund, but I did not want to ask you that way. I did not want you to feel pressured or obligated. I wanted to ask you properly when you were safe and happy and completely free to choose. I am choosing, Victoria said. I am choosing you, Arthur Zimmerman. Will you marry me? Arthur laughed, a sound of pure joy. You are supposed to wait for me to ask you. We have never done things the conventional way, Victoria pointed out. Why start now? Fair enough, Arthur agreed. He shifted so he could look into her eyes properly. Victoria Zeller, you are the most remarkable woman I have ever met. You are brave and strong and kind, and you make me want to be a better man. I love you more than I knew it was possible to love another person. Will you marry me and make me the happiest man alive? Yes, Victoria said, smiling through happy tears. Yes, 1,000 times yes. They kissed then, a long, deep kiss that sealed their commitment to each other. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. When? Arthur asked. When do you want to get married? As soon as possible, Victoria said. I do not need a fancy wedding or elaborate preparations. I just need you and someone to make it official. Everything else is just decoration. Tomorrow, Arthur said decisively. We will ride into Millbrook tomorrow and have Sheriff Carson perform the ceremony. He has the authority as a lawman, and he already knows the situation. Simple and quick, just the way you want it. Victoria nodded, her smile bright. Tomorrow, she agreed. By this time tomorrow, I will be Mrs. Victoria Zimmerman. That has a nice sound to it, Arthur said, pulling her close again. They spent the rest of the evening cleaning the cabin together, righting overturned furniture and sweeping up broken dishes. The physical work was cathartic, a way of reclaiming their space and putting the frightening events behind them. By the time they finished, the cabin looked like home again. That night, they slept wrapped in each other's arms, both of them feeling at peace for the first time in days. The threat that had hung over them was finally gone. Edmund Haverford had been faced and defeated, and Victoria was truly free to build the life she chose. The next morning dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for a wedding. Victoria wore her best dress, the blue one Arthur had first seen her in at the church, and Arthur wore his cleanest shirt and vest. They both felt giddy with happiness and anticipation as they rode toward Millbrook. Sheriff Carson was surprised to see them, but quickly understood the situation when Arthur explained their intentions. I would be honored to perform the ceremony, he said warmly. Let me grab my wife to serve as a witness, and we can do this properly. Mrs. Carson, a plump, cheerful woman who ran the general store, was delighted to be included. She fussed over Victoria, arranging her hair and producing a small bouquet of wildflowers from somewhere. Every bride needs flowers, she declared. The ceremony itself was simple but heartfelt. They stood in front of Sheriff Carson's desk, holding hands, while he read the words that would bind them together legally and spiritually. When it came time for the vows, Arthur spoke from his heart. I, Arthur Zimmerman, take you, Victoria Zeller, to be my wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and protect you for all the days of my life. I promise to be your partner in all things, to support your dreams and share your burdens. I promise to always be honest with you, to always fight for us, and to never take for granted the gift of your love. This I swear before God and these witnesses. Victoria's voice was steady despite the tears streaming down her face as she spoke her own vows. I, Victoria Zeller, take you, Arthur Zimmerman, to be my husband. I promise to love you fiercely and completely, to stand by your side through whatever challenges we face. I promise to build a home with you filled with laughter and warmth, to be your comfort in difficult times and your companion in happy ones. I promise to choose you every day in every way for as long as we both live. This I swear before God and these witnesses." Sheriff Carson pronounced them husband and wife, and Arthur kissed his bride with a tenderness that made Mrs. Carson sigh happily. When they pulled apart, both were beaming. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Zimmerman," Sheriff Carson said, shaking Arthur's hand and hugging Victoria. "May you have many happy years together." They celebrated with a simple lunch at the town's only restaurant, joined by the Carsons, who insisted on treating them. The meal was filled with laughter and well wishes, and Victoria felt warmth spreading through her chest as she realized this was what family was supposed to feel like. Not the cold, calculating relationships of her past, but genuine affection and support. As they rode back to the ranch that afternoon, now officially married, Arthur reached over and took Victoria's hand. "How does it feel to be Mrs. Zimmerman?" "It feels right," Victoria said simply. "Like this is who I was always meant to be. I just had to find my way here." "We found our way to each other," Arthur corrected. "Both of us were looking for something we did not even know we needed." They reached the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Arthur helped Victoria down from her horse and swept her into his arms, carrying her across the threshold of their home. Victoria laughed, the sound bright and free. "Starting our marriage with tradition," she teased. "Starting our marriage right," Arthur replied, setting her down gently in the main room. "Everything from this moment forward is ours, Victoria. Our home, our choices, our future. No one can take that from us." Victoria cupped his face in her hands, her eyes shining with love and certainty. "Then let us make it a beautiful future," she said. They came together then in a kiss that held promise and passion, the beginning of their true life together as husband and wife. What started as gentle quickly deepened, as the desire they had been holding back finally found expression. Arthur lifted Victoria again and carried her to the bedroom, laying her carefully on the bed. "Are you sure?" he asked, giving her every chance to slow down or stop. "I have never been more sure of anything," Victoria assured him. "I love you, Arthur. I want this. I want you." They made love slowly and tenderly, both of them new to sharing such intimacy with someone they truly loved. There was no awkwardness, no fumbling uncertainty, just two people learning each other, bringing pleasure and finding joy in the connection. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Victoria's head on Arthur's chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I did not know it could be like that," Victoria said quietly. "Edmund was the only one I had, and it was never anything like what we just shared." Arthur tightened his arms around her. "That is because this is built on love and respect. Those things make all the difference." "They make all the difference," Victoria agreed. She tilted her head to kiss his jaw. "Thank you for being patient with me, for giving me time to heal before we reached this point." "You never have to thank me for that," Arthur said. "You deserve time, and you deserve to make your own choices. I will always honor that." They drifted off to sleep wrapped in each other, content and deeply happy. Over the following weeks and months, they settled into married life with an ease that felt natural. Victoria's skills complemented Arthur's, and together they made significant improvements to the ranch. The garden flourished under her care, providing vegetables that Victoria canned for the winter. Arthur expanded the barn and brought in more cattle, building up the herd that would provide their livelihood. Arthur still took occasional jobs as a lawman when they needed extra money, or when a situation particularly required his skills, but he made sure Victoria was never left alone and vulnerable again. Sometimes she traveled with him, and they made adventures of the trips. Other times, the Carsons would come stay at the ranch, keeping Victoria company and ensuring she was protected. The shadow of Edmund Haverford faded over time. Word came through Arthur's network that Edmund had eventually married a wealthy widow from Boston, someone who likely served his ambitions better than Victoria would have. Neither Arthur nor Victoria felt any satisfaction in that news, only relief that the chapter was truly closed. A year after their wedding, Victoria discovered she was pregnant. Arthur's joy was so profound that he lifted her off her feet and spun her around the kitchen, both of them laughing like children. They spent the months of her pregnancy preparing, Arthur building a beautiful wooden cradle and Victoria sewing tiny clothes. The night their son was born during a spring storm with Mrs. Carson serving as midwife, Arthur held the tiny, squalling bundle and felt his heart expand in ways he had not known possible. "What should we name him?" Victoria asked, tired but glowing with happiness. "What about Samuel?" Arthur suggested. "After your brother, so that part of him lives on." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "That is perfect. Samuel Zimmerman. He would have liked that." Little Samuel proved to be a happy, healthy baby who looked like his mother but had his father's serious gray eyes. As he grew, 2 more children followed. A daughter they named Grace, for the grace they felt had brought them together, and then another son they called Daniel, a strong biblical name that Arthur favored. The ranch prospered over the years, and so did their love. They faced challenges, as all couples do. There were lean years when the cattle prices dropped, and they had to tighten their belts. There were illnesses that frightened them, children with fevers that had them praying through long nights. There were disagreements and hurt feelings that required communication and forgiveness to overcome. But through it all, they remained partners, facing everything together. Arthur watched Victoria bloom over the years, transforming from the frightened woman he had found in that old church to a confident, capable ranch wife and mother. She learned to rope cattle alongside him, to manage their finances with a sharp mind for numbers, to make their house a home filled with laughter and love. Her artwork returned too. Arthur built her a small studio in the loft where she could paint when the mood struck, and her watercolors decorated every wall of their home. Victoria watched Arthur soften over the years, the hardness that came from years of lawman work gradually easing as he spent more time with his family. He was a wonderful father, patient and playful, teaching their children to ride and shoot and respect the land. He still wore his badge occasionally, still brought in outlaws when duty called, but his heart was firmly rooted at home. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Arthur woke Victoria before dawn and led her outside. In the years since they married, he had slowly been rebuilding the old Spanish mission church where they first met. He had never told her about the project, working on it in spare hours when she thought he was checking fence lines or hunting. Now, as the sun rose, he brought her to the restored building. "Arthur," Victoria breathed, staring at the solid walls, the new roof, the restored cross standing tall and straight. "You did this." "I did this," he confirmed. "Because you said you came to that church looking for peace, and I wanted you to always have a place where you can find it. This is yours, Victoria, for prayer or painting or just sitting quietly, whatever you need." Victoria turned to him with tears streaming down her face and kissed him deeply. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" "We found each other," Arthur corrected, as he always did. "And that makes us both lucky." They stood together in front of the church as the sun rose higher, illuminating the land they had built their life on. In the distance, they could see their cabin with smoke rising from the chimney where their oldest, Samuel, would be starting breakfast as he did every morning. Beyond that, the cattle grazed peacefully in lush pastures. Everything they had dreamed of and worked for was spread out before them, tangible and real. "Do you ever regret it?" Arthur asked quietly. "Leaving the life you could have had in St. Louis, The society, the culture. Never, Victoria said without hesitation. This is real, Arthur. Everything there was performance and pretense. Here I can breathe. Here I can be myself. Here I am loved for who I am, not for who someone else wants me to be. I have you and our children and this beautiful life we have built together. What could I possibly regret? Arthur kissed her forehead. I just want you to be happy. I am happy, Victoria assured him. Deeply, completely happy. Are you? More than I ever imagined possible, Arthur replied honestly. You gave me everything I did not know I was missing, Victoria. Purpose beyond duty, joy beyond satisfaction, love beyond anything I thought I deserved. You are my peace. They walked back to the cabin hand in hand, ready to face another day together. Their children greeted them with hugs and chatter about plans for the day. Samuel wanted help with a new calf that was being stubborn about nursing. Grace was excited about a bird's nest she had found with eggs in it. Daniel, still small, just wanted to be held and cuddled. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own blessings and challenges. Samuel grew into a fine young man who inherited his father's sense of justice and his mother's artistic sensibility. He eventually became a lawyer, using his skills to help people who could not afford proper representation. Grace became a teacher, opening a small school on the ranch property for the scattered families in the area. Daniel followed his father's footsteps more directly, becoming a lawman who was known for his fairness and integrity. All three children married well, bringing home spouses who were welcomed into the family with open arms. Grandchildren followed, filling the ranch with noise and laughter and constant activity. Arthur and Victoria found themselves in the enviable position of being the center of a large, loving family that gathered regularly. As they grew older, Arthur's hair turned silver and lines deepened around Victoria's eyes, but they remained as devoted to each other as they had been on their wedding day. They still took morning rides together when weather and health permitted. They still sat on the porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sunset. They still found reasons to laugh and kiss and celebrate the life they had built. On a warm summer evening, 35 years after Arthur first found Victoria in that old church, they sat together on that same porch. Their grandchildren were playing in the yard, their shouts and giggles carrying on the breeze. Samuel and his wife were visiting, along with Grace and her family. Daniel was expected the next day with his own crew. The ranch house had been expanded over the years to accommodate everyone when they gathered. We did well, Arthur said, gesturing to the scene before them. Look at all this, Victoria. All these lives we helped bring into the world, all this love. We did very well, Victoria agreed, leaning her head on his shoulder. Though there were times I was not sure we would make it through. Like when Samuel broke his arm falling out of that tree, Arthur recalled. Or when Grace got lost in the woods for 6 hours and we thought our hearts would stop from fear, Victoria added. Or when Daniel decided to try riding the bull and nearly gave us both strokes, Arthur continued. They laughed together, all those terrifying moments now tempered by time and good outcomes. But we made it through, Victoria said. Together. Always together, Arthur affirmed. He turned to look at her, seeing the girl from the church and the woman she had become superimposed on each other. I love you, Victoria Zimmerman. I have loved you since the day I found you seeking peace, and I will love you until my last breath. And I love you, Arthur Zimmerman, Victoria replied. You gave me everything I was looking for and so much more than I knew to wish for. You are my greatest adventure and my safest harbor. You are my peace. They kissed, a sweet, gentle kiss of deep abiding love as their family played around them and the sun set over the land they had made their own. This was the peace Victoria had been seeking all those years ago in the old church. Not silence or solitude, but the vibrant, messy, beautiful chaos of a life well lived with someone who truly loved her. Arthur and Victoria lived many more years together, growing old with grace and gratitude. They saw all their grandchildren grow up and start having children of their own. They celebrated 50 years of marriage with a huge party that brought people from all over Missouri. They never stopped holding hands, never stopped finding joy in each other's company, never stopped being grateful for the day their paths crossed. When Arthur finally passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, Victoria mourned deeply, but without regret. They had been given so many good years together, had built such a beautiful life. She lived 3 more years without him, surrounded by the family they had created, still painting in her studio, still tending her garden, still visiting the restored church he had rebuilt for her. On a quiet morning in early spring, Victoria passed away in her sleep, a peaceful end to a life that had found its true beginning in choosing courage over comfort and love over security. She was laid to rest beside Arthur on a hill overlooking their ranch, their graves marked with simple stones that bore their names and the dates of their long, full lives. But their story did not end there. It lived on in their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, in the ranch that still bore the Zimmerman name, in the church that still stood as a testament to one man's love for his wife. The story of the cowboy who found a woman seeking peace, and how together they built something rare and precious that lasted far beyond their own lives. The old church still stood decades later, maintained by the family as a memorial and a place of gathering. On its wall, Daniel had commissioned a painting from a noted artist, a recreation of one of his mother's early works. It showed a view from the church doorway looking out over the prairie, the endless sky and rolling hills captured in delicate watercolors. Anyone who looked at it could feel the peace Victoria had sought and found, the beauty she had learned to see in this wild, rugged land. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind was right, locals swore they could see 2 figures walking hand in hand across those hills. A tall man with silver hair and a woman with auburn waves, still together, still finding joy in each other's presence. Their love echoing across time as a reminder that the best things in life are worth fighting for, worth choosing, and worth building carefully with someone who sees you truly and loves you wholly.